Hey there. This week I have been preparing for our science for the upcoming school year, and I thought I would walk through because a lot of people ask, like, what do you do to pre read or prepare or whatever? And so I'm going to walk through all the different resources that I have that we're doing this year and how I put that together for this coming school year. So, first things first is I have my Nature Explorers rotation B that I printed out so that I have all of that information ready. And then I go through and I read the beginning materials. So she has like the guideposts of nature study. I just read through this quickly, skim this because this is the same as her Nature A rotation, but it is good to have a refresher just to renew my mind on how we're using this, how we're doing the things. So, walk through that. Then I go through and in our term, I've already laid out the stuff in my document, so I don't have to do that again. But if it was not in there, I would go through my weekly outline and I would put all that information in. So, like, we're doing the wild rose on week 1. Okay, so let's walk through as if we're just prepping week 1. So, there are these observation booklets, which I printed that look like this when you print them. I still have yet to, there's a line here, you cut it there, and then you fold it, and it makes this little cute booklet at the end. So that is one thing I have to do is I have to cut and arrange the 2 booklets that we have for 2 booklets. I think it's 2. Yes, 2 booklets that we have. Then I went through and any of these diagrams I printed on cardstock as well for us. And then I go through and I look, and there is the special studies reading. So for this year, special studies reading is coming from the year round for most of it. So I went through and I read the suggested pages for that. And when I did that, there is a lot about berries this year. And so I had printed out some of the pictures of the different kinds of berries that that are referenced in this book, because while this book does have its own pictures, I found this past year that those pictures did not exactly suffice because it, number one, does not include all the berries, and number two, it does not have them in color. And so while you can see a great sketch drawing and stuff, I just thought being able to see the real thing would be more helpful. So I went through and did that. And then they have on here further exploration. I have not done any of the further exploration topics to this point, just because there's enough between the object lesson, the nature walk, the nature notebook, and the special studies. So in the future, if I started getting to the point where we could use some of that further exploration, then I might. Also, in the special studies reading, sometimes there is no reading out of the year round. And if that is the case, I might look through here and see, do I have any of these books? If I do, I might highlight them. I probably don't pre-read those just for time's sake, and we may or may not use them. So that's how I prepped our Nature Explorers. Then, as part of the science for my Form 2, is I have the Living Science Guides from Sabbath Mood. So this is the astronomy guide. And in each section, she has a teacher prep. And so she tells you, it's kind of hard to see, but it tells you to write down questions out of your Handbook of Nature Study and what section you're going to read. And so I just, on my little note card, wrote my questions down, and then I'm sticking it right in my guide so that when I turn to that, it's already there and ready for me. I will probably actually like paper clip those on just so that they stay put. But that is one way I'm prepping this guide. I also went through and created a list because she has a purchasing list for the different experiments you're going to need to do. And I also went and printed, of course, this isn't good. There we go. I printed the exam questions for this. And so I have, like I said, there's the, there is some stuff I still have to do in the week of the prep, because in this one specifically, there's like where you have to go through and print the star charts or whatever for the week. And so we have to do that still. And the other thing I have to do is we have to pick out special study topics that my kid would choose. And then I have to have the appropriate books for that on hand. Outside of this special studies, they're kind of going to merge together, but it's more a student-led special studies based on the special study topics we're discussing in there, if that makes sense. So we have to pick those out so I can have books on hand. And so that is their basic science, but on top of that is there's the readings out of Find the Constellations, which this is very short, kid-friendly book that we're using for the astronomy. And so I just read through this. I didn't take any extreme notes or anything like that, because I had read the Handbook of Nature Study and it is just reinforcing similar ideas. Okay. And then the last thing for my Form 2 is the Storybook of Science. And so I went through, and there is a pacing that was given out for A Delectable Education, the cohort. And so I used that to then put together a guide for myself. So on this guide specifically, I go through and I wrote some seed ideas, some scaffolding ideas, and then a recap of this. However, I also, they talk about in this book the Wily Dervish story. And so I printed off a picture of like what they're talking about on there. Or here is like the lice, the aphids being eaten. And then on this one, I had put a QR code. This one must have been, this is talking about the ants milking the aphids. And so this is a video of that, because my kids really enjoy getting to see a lot of these things. And so if you can't just walk outside and see them. Also for aphids, we have their life cycle so that we could look at that, because it's a little bit of a different life cycle with how they asexually produce and sexually reproduce. And so I thought that would be an interesting thing to kind of take and look at. And so that is what I like to do for my guides when I'm making an actual guide between the seed ideas. Sometimes I'll include notebooking ideas, but for this one I didn't. And then for my Form 1 student, we have trees and shrubs. I already did a guide for this when my Form 2 went through this, so I don't have to do any prep there. And then I have this book that we will be reading as well with her. And then this book and this book. And these ones I have not been through with my other child, so I still have to pre-read these books. But that is how far I've gotten this week so far. I kind of been working on it like about a week at this point, because I started it middle of last week. And so that is what I'm prepping this week. I'm also working on a template for a planner that I'm looking forward to, because I have found it hard to put down in a planner the things for my students that I am working with, that I need to be checking off their stuff, versus like a student that would be on their own and has their own planner. That's one thing. But I need different columns in the same day for my different students. And that became pretty apparent when I was using the School Nest notebook this year. I like their layout. However, I don't like that there's only like one space, one column underneath the day, because with so many different subjects, it'd be nice to be able to write out both students down that column. So I am working on something that will hopefully work for more of a Charlotte Mason style family with a lot of subjects. And so, and then I wanted a place at the bottom where I could make notes where we left off or where we may have not hit our forecasting, so that I know where to start next time. And those notes then I could transfer the next week over into where we're going. The same with like reading, where we left off in our reading, because I was finding I would leave off in like the words section, or I would leave off in a reading section, and it was getting confusing with my bookmark. Where do we leave off? And so it was helpful to create something with a note section. So I'm working on that as well, to print off and trial for the last few weeks of this year, in hopes that I can just print it and it'll be our thing next year. So anyways, hopefully that's helpful to show how I prep our science. And then obviously with the supply list, I will go through, and I pretty much do one big purchase of all the supplies at the end. So I just make a note under my spreadsheet that need to purchase science supplies. Then I know that there is a science supply list that I still need to buy, and then I get when we're out. So hopefully that's helpful. If you have any questions, obviously leave a comment and let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching the video.